The first time Kang Do-hyun smiled in 23 years. His mistress was dripping wet in the pool.
The first time Kang Do-hyun smiled in 23 years, his mistress was dripping wet in the pool. His stepsister was beside her, screaming so loudly the live band stopped playing. 40 guests stood frozen around the terrace. 2 business journalists lowered their champagne glasses. 3 board members stared at me like they had just realized the woman they called useless was holding the debt that kept their empire alive. And Do-hyun, my Korean Mafia husband, the man who had not smiled at his wedding. The man who had not smiled when his father survived surgery. The man whose silence could make an entire room of executives stop breathing, looked at me across the edge of that pool and smiled. Not because what happened was funny, because for the first time in 3 years, I had stopped being quiet. For 3 years, they called me the collateral wife. For 3 years, I sat at the end of a dining table long enough for 20 people while nobody sat within 4 chairs of me. For 3 years, his mistress wore his mother's pearls like she had been born to replace me. For 3 years, his stepsister introduced me as Do-hyun's arrangement, as if I was not a wife, not a woman, not a person, but a debt with a heartbeat. My name is Naledi Calloway, and for 3 years, I let the Kang family believe I did not know how to fight. That was never true. I just had not decided they were worth the damage yet. But that night, under the lights of the Kang-Woori anniversary pool party, with champagne running down the front of my black silk dress, and his mistress laughing beside his stepsister, I finally found a reason. They wanted me erased in front of the board, so I gave them a scene nobody could look away from. By midnight, the mistress was in the water. The stepsister was in the water. The journalists had the real story. The board had the real numbers. And the Korean Mafia boss who had not smiled in 23 years finally looked at his wife like he understood one thing. I was never the collateral. I was the creditor. For 3 years, I lived in a house with 14 bedrooms, and I was only ever welcome in one of them. The guest wing. Not the master suite. Not the family rooms. Not the private dining hall where the Kang elders made decisions over imported whiskey and silence. One room. One controlled corner of a mansion that everyone pretended belonged to my husband's family, even though my father's money had quietly saved the empire that paid for its lights. I learned early that cruelty inside wealthy houses does not always arrive shouting. Sometimes it arrives as a tray left outside your door. Sometimes it arrives as an empty chair beside your plate. Sometimes it arrives as someone calling you Mrs. Kang with a smile that means, "You do not belong here." They called me the collateral wife. Not to my face. Never to my face. The Kang family was too polished for that. They were the kind of people who could insult you with perfect posture, perfect diamonds, and perfect grammar. But I heard the name everywhere. In the pause before the housekeeper said my title. In the way guests forgot to shake my hand. In the way the staff looked away whenever UCR walked past me wearing pearls that had belonged to Do-hyun's mother. CR was the mistress everyone pretended not to see. Beautiful. Soft-voiced. Expensive. She moved through the mansion like she had already been promised my place and was only waiting for me to understand I had lost it. Then there was Kang Ha-yoon, Do-hyun's stepsister. Sharp smile. Sharper tongue. The kind of woman who never raised her voice because she had spent her whole life watching other people bleed from words spoken gently. At family gatherings, she introduced me as Do-hyun's arrangement. Not his wife. Not Naledi. His arrangement. And every time she said it, people smiled the way cowards smile when cruelty happens near them, but not to them. Do-hyun heard it. That was the part that hurt at first. Not the name. Not the empty chairs. Not even Seo walking through my kitchen like she had a right to the house. It was Do-hyun hearing it all and choosing silence. He had been silent long before me. People said Kang Do-hyun had not smiled in 23 years. They said it like a legend, like proof of discipline, like proof he was built for power. 23 years old when he took control of Kang Group's logistics arm after his father's health failed. 23 years of no softness, no public laughter, no visible joy, no emotional weakness. He did not smile at his father's recovery. He did not smile at the Busan terminal opening. He did not smile at our wedding. He stood beside me in a black tuxedo that day like a man attending a funeral for a life he had not chosen. I used to think his stillness made him cruel. Later, I understood it made him tired. But tired men can still be cowards. And for 3 years, Do-hun let his house teach me what he did not have the courage to say. You are useful. You are necessary. You are not loved. The marriage was not romance. It was a financial scar dressed in white. My father, Ezekiel Calloway, built a shipping conglomerate from one rusted freighter and 40 years of refusing to sleep when the bills were due. He was not flashy. He did not need to be. Flash is what people use when they do not have leverage. My father had leverage. 11 years before the pool party, Kang Group nearly lost its logistics arm to a hostile buyout. The family was bleeding money, reputation, and control. Kang Tae-sik, Do-hyun's father, was too proud to beg publicly and too desperate not to accept help privately. So my father saved them. Not in the newspapers. Not at a press conference. Quietly. Through 3 shell entities, 2 debt instruments, and 1 covenant that made the Calloway name the invisible spine inside Kang Group's survival. The marriage came later. A guarantee. A signature. A living condition written into an agreement men around me assumed I did not understand. As long as I remained Do-hun's wife, the Calloway entities would not call the debt. That was the arrangement. Not love. Not alliance. Collateral. That was what they called me, because it was easier than admitting the truth. I was the reason their empire still had knees. Do-hun never asked for that marriage. I knew that. He inherited a war he did not start, from a father too ill to keep fighting it, inside a family that valued control more than breath. But I did not ask for it either. The difference was, I did not punish him for it. He punished me with absence. The day after our wedding, I came downstairs and found Madame Choi, his stepmother, instructing the staff. She eats at 7, she said. Not to me, but to Mrs. Yeon, the housekeeper. Separately is fine. She is not used to how we do things here. No reason to make either of them uncomfortable pretending otherwise. Then she looked toward the hallway and added the sentence that named my marriage. Think of her as collateral. We treat collateral carefully. We do not have to treat it like family. Do-hun stood in the doorway. He heard it. I watched him hear it. I watched him decide not to correct it. That was the moment I understood the house. Not the mansion. The house. The system. The hierarchy. The silent violence of a family that could owe you its survival and still make you eat alone. I did not cry. I went upstairs, opened my laptop, and started reading. Contracts. Shareholder filings. Merger documents. Debt schedules. Board minutes. Private restructuring notes Do-hun left behind because everyone in that mansion assumed I was too quiet to be dangerous. That was their mistake. They confused silence with surrender. But silence is often where women like me sharpen the blade. An ordinary morning in that house was its own kind of humiliation. At 7, I came downstairs. My plate was always set at the far end of the dining table. Not by accident. No wealthy family accidentally places a woman 20 feet away from belonging. Mrs. Yeon brought my tea with eyes lowered, ashamed of rules she did not make and could not afford to disobey. At 7:15, Sia arrived in one of Madame Choi's silk robes, not a guest robe, a family robe. She helped herself to coffee from a kitchen that should have been mine, then smiled at me like I was a stain she expected the staff to remove eventually. Sleep well in your room? She asked every morning. Your room. Never the guest room. Never the East Wing. Your room. Like even the language of the house had been trained to remind me I was temporary. I always said yes. It was never a lie. I slept fine because I had learned long ago that people trying to destabilize you are always hoping you will hand them evidence that it worked. Hyun was different. Sia wanted my place. Hyun wanted my humiliation. She liked witnesses. At one family dinner, she handed me a gift bag in front of 30 relatives. Inside was an English-Korean dictionary from an airport bookstore. In case, she said sweetly, you ever want to actually talk to us? The room laughed. I said thank you. And I meant it, because without knowing it, she had handed me proof of exactly how little she feared me. That night, I went back to my room and read another 60 pages of corporate filings in Korean. By the 2nd year, I understood more than they thought I heard. By the 3rd year, I understood almost everything. I knew which board members hated each other. I knew which executives were useful. I knew which divisions were profitable only on paper. I knew which contracts could collapse if the Calloway entities withdrew support. I knew exactly where Kang-Group's logistics division was weak. And I knew one thing more. The day I stopped being quiet, the family would not survive the sound. The invitation to the Kang-Woori 10th anniversary pool party arrived on a Tuesday. Mrs. Yeon brought it to me with both hands, like she was delivering bad news wrapped in embossed paper. Madam Choi says you should attend, she said. For appearances. I opened the envelope. Thick cream card. Gold lettering. Private terrace. Formal poolside attire. Business press attending. Board members expected. The 10th anniversary of the merger that had almost destroyed Kang Group before my father's money saved it. Interesting. Then Mrs. Yeon added, Madam Choi said to remind you to keep it simple. Keep it simple meant do not be seen. Keep it simple meant do not embarrass us. Keep it simple meant exist just enough to prove the marriage is real, but not enough to make anyone ask why the wife is treated like a guest. I wore black silk. Simple, technically, but unmistakably mine. When I stepped onto the South Terrace that evening, the whole party glittered like a lie. The pool stretched across the estate like a sheet of dark glass, reflecting string lights and expensive laughter. Waiters carried champagne. Executives from Kang Group and Woori Shipping smiled at each other like men who had not spent years planning how to take more than they were owed. A live band played something smooth and forgettable. Women in silk leaned near the water. Men in tailored suits watched each other more than they watched the party. That was the thing about corporate families tied to Mafia power. Nothing was ever only celebration. Every toast had a ledger behind it. Every smile had a threat folded underneath. Every room had guards pretending to be decoration. Do-hun stood near the bar in a black suit, expression flat, one hand in his pocket. Two security men positioned behind him at angles only people like us noticed. No smile, no warmth, no visible acknowledgement that his wife had arrived. Siar was already there. Silver dress, his mother's pearls, a smile sharp enough to cut silk. Hyun stood beside her in red, champagne in hand, eyes bright with the excitement of a woman who thought tonight had been designed for someone else's shame. The first insult came at the gate. The valet checked the guest list twice. Mrs. Kang is already checked in, he said. There are 2 of us with that name tonight, I replied. I let him sit with that until his face changed. The second insult came near the champagne tower. A junior finance associate introduced me to a Woori board member as the quiet one. I looked at him. I am not quiet. I am patient. There is a difference, and by the end of tonight, you will understand it. His laughter faded before he finished making the sound. The third insult came from Yoon Sang-keol, head of Woori's shipping division, a man I had watched in documents for 3 years. He wanted Kang Group's logistics division folded into his own, quietly, slowly, profitably, and he thought I might be the soft place to push. Mrs. Kang, he said, smiling too warmly. There has been some talk about restructuring the covenant. I would love to sit down with you away from all this business noise. I think you and I could come to an arrangement that benefits everyone. There is already an arrangement, I said. It is called a covenant, and it is not quiet. It is just not addressed to men who assume I do not read my own family's paperwork. His smile flickered. That was when I knew the night had possibilities. Not revenge yet. Possibilities. I looked toward the pool. I would stay close to the water if I were you, I said. It is about to get interesting. He laughed because he did not understand. Men like that often laugh right before the floor disappears. Siar found me near the bar. Careful, she said, loud enough for her circle to hear. The help usually enters through the side. A ripple of laughter moved through the guests around her. Hyun did not laugh. She smiled. That was worse. She is not the help, Hyun said in Korean, then switched to English so the insult would land clean. She is the invoice. Isn't that right, Naledi? Daddy's little payment plan. There it was. Not collateral this time. Invoice. A debt reduced to a woman. I had 100 replies ready. 3 years gives a person time. But I had learned something in that house. The first blow does not need to be the loudest. It needs to be the one they cannot recover from. If you say my name again, I said quietly, make sure you can still afford to say it after tonight. Siar laughed. Is that a threat? From you? It is a fact, I said. You just have not been told the facts yet. That should have ended it. It did not. Hayun stepped closer and flicked the strap of my dress with one manicured finger, as if checking cheap fabric. Not bad, she said, for someone no one is looking at. Then Madame Choi arrived with the worst possible audience. Board members, executives, 2 business journalists. She air-kissed Sayar, touched Hayun's shoulder, did not look at me. Everyone, she announced, sweeping one hand toward them. These are the real women of this family. Aren't they lovely? The terrace laughed politely. The journalists looked interested. The board members smiled in the weak way people smile when they see cruelty but would rather call it tradition. And 30 feet away, Kang Do-hyun watched, saying nothing. Again. That was when something in my chest went still. Cold. Clear. Not broken. Finished. I looked at the water, then at Sayar, then at Hayun. Then at the board members who had spent 3 years sitting on profits built on my father's capital while allowing his daughter to be treated like an unwanted guest. I smiled without warmth. Comment collateral if you have ever watched someone try to erase you in a room full of people who knew better. Because 4 minutes after that, I stopped being quiet. Hayun made the final mistake. She lifted her champagne glass and pretended to stumble. The champagne spilled across the front of my black silk dress. Gold liquid down the bodice. Gasps around us. Then laughter. Siar covered her mouth, badly pretending to be shocked. You should probably go change, she said, before someone important sees you looking like that. I looked down at the stain, then at both of them standing beside the pool in dresses worth more than most people's rent. So certain, so comfortable, so sure I was still the woman who would go upstairs, wash the stain, and return smaller. I was not. You are right, I said. I should go change. Hayun smiled. But so should you, I added. Both of you. She blinked. What are you talking, Ab? She did not finish. I moved once. Not wild. Not messy. Not rage. A single controlled movement at the edge of the pool, enough to send Hayun stumbling backward into Sayar, whose heels had no chance against surprise. Both of them tipped over the edge together. Silver and red fabric flashed. Champagne glasses fell. Water exploded upward. The splash silenced the entire party. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. 40 guests, 2 journalists, a stopped band, 3 board members with champagne glasses halfway to their mouths, and me, standing at the pool's edge in a stained black dress, completely dry, completely composed, watching the 2 women who had spent 3 years trying to drown me in humiliation finally learn what water felt like. Siar surfaced first, gasping, her silver dress clinging to her, makeup streaking down her face. "Get security!" she screamed. "She attacked us! Get security!" Hayun thrashed beside her, red dress ballooning in the water like a warning flag. Madame Choi lunged forward. "Have you lost your mind?" I did not raise my voice. I know exactly what I did. The question is whether you know who you have been laughing at for 3 years. 2 guards started toward me. I did not look at them. I looked at Do-hyun. For 1 long second, I did not know what kind of man would arrive at the edge of that pool. The husband who had ignored me? The Mafia boss trained to protect the family image? Or the son of an empire that had just realized its debt had a face? He crossed the terrace quickly, faster than I had ever seen him move. Siar reached toward him from the water. "Do-hyun, help me. She needs to be arrested. She needs to be. Stop talking," he said. Not to me. To her. The guards froze. Madame Choi froze. Even Hayun went quiet. Do-hyun looked down at Sayar, then at Hayun, then at me. And something changed in his face. Not a smile. Not yet. But the locked door where a smile should have been finally cracked. "You are going to let her get away with this?" Siar shouted, climbing toward the pool ladder. "In front of the board? In front of the press?" Do-hyun did not move to help her. "I am not letting her get away with anything," he said. "I am asking why it took her 3 years to do it." Madame Choi's face drained. Do-hyun. He turned toward the board members and journalists now gathering near the pool. "For those taking notes," he said, voice calm enough to be terrifying, "my wife's maiden name is Calloway." The journalist's pen moved immediately. Some of you will recognize that name from the Woori restructuring 11 years ago. Fewer of you know that the capital that saved Kang Group's logistics division came from her father's holdings, structured through 3 entities that, as of this morning, are no longer required to remain quiet. The terrace went still in a new way. Not shock. Calculation. That was how powerful rooms processed fear. One board member, Chairman Yang, slowly lowered his glass. If the Calloway entities hold the covenant, he said carefully, then whoever just went into that pool may have made the worst public relations decision this company has seen in 10 years. Madam Choi whispered, "Do not do this here." Du-hun looked at her. "You did this here." His voice cut through the terrace cleanly. "You called her collateral. You seated her 4 chairs away from anyone who mattered. You let my mistress wear family pearls while my wife ate alone. You let my stepsister call her an invoice. You built 3 years of performance around the idea that she had no power in front of the one crowd capable of verifying whether that was true." He looked at me then. I should have corrected it a long time ago. My throat tightened. Not enough to soften me, but enough to remind me I was still human under all that patience. "I let it continue," he said, "because admitting what she brought into this family meant admitting how little I had done to deserve her staying quiet. Sia, dripping and furious, tried one last angle. She humiliated us publicly." I finally spoke. "That is 3 years of interest." I looked at the board. Compounding. No one laughed. They understood too well. I turned to Madam Choi. "You introduced Sia and Ha-yoon as the real women of this family in front of journalists 90 seconds before both of them went into the pool. I think that quote will age very interestingly by Monday's market open." Ha-yoon, still wet and shaking, found her voice. "She is making all of this up. Do-hyun, tell them she is lying." Do-hyun's answer was quiet. "I have seen the filings." The whole terrace heard him anyway. I had access to them for 3 years and never looked closely enough, because looking would mean admitting I married a woman with more leverage over this family than my own father. He swallowed, and I chose cruelty over gratitude. That was the moment the smile came. Not from joy, not from romance, from relief. The exhausted relief of a man who had spent 23 years holding an empire together with both hands and had finally realized he did not have to hold it alone. He turned back to Sia and Ha-yoon. "You humiliated her for 3 years. You called her collateral. You called her the invoice. You used my silence as permission. That ends tonight." Madam Choi whispered, "What does that mean?" "It means Sia's allowance stops Monday. It means Ha-yoon's courtesy seat on the junior board is under review. It means every business arrangement either of you has run under the Kang name gets audited this week." Sia looked suddenly afraid. Real fear this time. Not performance. "You cannot do that." Du-hun's mouth curved slightly. There it was. The first smile. Dangerous. Tired. Real. "I can," he said. "I just should have done it sooner." Comment stillness if you have ever watched someone finally stop protecting people who never protected them back. Then he took off his jacket. Not for Seah. Not for Ha-yoon. For me. My dress was stained, not wet. I did not need it. That was why the gesture mattered. He held it out in front of the board, the press, his mother, his mistress, his stepsister, and every person who had ever mistaken his silence for my worthlessness. For 3 years, he had let rooms choose everyone but me. That night, he chose me where everyone could see it. "I am not asking you to forgive me," he said quietly. "Not tonight. Not in front of an audience. I do not get to turn 3 years of silence into one public gesture and call it repair." Good. At least he knew that. I only needed them to hear from me that it is over. The seating chart. The silence. The pretending I did not see what this house was doing to you. "You saw it," I said. It was not a question. I saw it, and did nothing. I told myself not looking was different from allowing it. His jaw tightened. It was not. I looked past him at Seah wringing water from her dress, at Ha-yoon shaking with rage, at Madam Choi doing the silent math of how much power had just slipped out of her hands because she underestimated the wrong woman. "They will say I planned this," I said. Du-hyun looked at me for one long moment. Then the corner of his mouth moved again. "You did plan this." A ripple moved through the terrace. Not laughter. Recognition. You spent 3 years memorizing contracts and shareholder filings inside a house where everyone assumed you could not read the room. Planned is not the wrong word. It is the only word. And the pool? He looked at the water. Then at Seah and Hayun. The pool was overdue. That line travelled faster than any headline. By morning, the whole house would know it. By Monday, the board would repeat it. By Wednesday, the business press would understand that the pool was never the story. The story was a woman they called Collateral finally collecting the debt. The video existed within hours. Of course it did. Someone had filmed everything from the champagne spill to the splash to Do-hun handing me his jacket. At first, people thought it was a scandal. A mistress. A stepsister. A wife. A pool. A Mafia family party collapsing under string lights. But by Sunday afternoon, the better version of the story began moving. The version with the filings. The version with the Calloway entities. The version with the decade-old covenant. The version that explained why 3 board members did not move to help the 2 women out of the water. The most honest 3 seconds Kang-Group had produced in years was not the splash. It was the silence after. By Monday morning, Kang-Group's stock dipped. By Wednesday, it recovered. Because the Business Daily did not run the story as a socialite fight. It ran it as a decade-long correction. Calloway Capital quietly backed Kang Logistics through Woori restructuring. That was the headline that mattered. Not the pool. Not the dress. Not Seah's ruined pearls. The money. The leverage. The truth. Seah's social media went dark by Sunday night. Hayun posted a statement claiming she had been attacked without provocation. Unfortunately for her, the video clearly showed the champagne spilling onto my dress moments before she entered the water. The internet did what the internet does. I did not need to be cruel. The footage handled that. Do-hun came home Sunday night from visiting his father, Kang Tae-sik. The chairman had not attended the party. His health had kept him away from stress, or so they said. Do-hun told me his father listened to the entire story in silence and asked one question. Why did it take 3 years and a pool for anyone in this house to tell me the truth? For the first time in our marriage, Do-hun sat across from me at the dining table without 4 empty chairs between us. He wants to meet you properly, he said. Not as collateral. Not as a quiet wife. Properly. I poured my tea. And Seah? Moved out. Hayun? Her junior board seat is gone by Friday. And your mother? He exhaled. She is learning that loyalty is not inherited just because a woman marries into a powerful name. That almost made me smile. Almost. What about Sang-keel? Do-hyun's eyes cooled. Finished. Not with scandal. Not with shouting. My father is moving every joint shipping route Woori holds with us to smaller carriers 1 contract at a time. By spring, Sang-keel's division will be too irrelevant to protect him. That is slow. That is the point, Do-hyun said. Men like him survive scandal. They do not survive irrelevance. For the first time, I understood why his family feared him. Do-hyun did not need to shout to destroy a man. He simply removed the room around him. Seah's lawyer called Tuesday. Do-hyun let me sit in on the call. That was new. For 3 years, doors closed before I reached them. Now one opened without my asking. My client has been a de facto member of the household for years, the lawyer said. She is entitled to compensation for the abrupt termination of her arrangement. Do-hun leaned back. Send me the contract. Silence. There is no formal contract, the lawyer said. Then there is no obligation. There was an established pattern of support. There was an allowance, Do-hun replied. Voluntary. No term. No promise. No severance. If your client wants a court to review it, I will provide 3 years of household expense records, including the family pearls she wore publicly while insulting my wife. Another silence. I will relay that to my client. The call ended. That is it? I asked. That is it, Do-hun said. People like Seah only had leverage here because nobody asked them to prove it. He looked at me. Yours was the only leverage in this house backed by an actual signature. Hayun's board meeting happened 4 days later. She argued the junior seat was hereditary. The board reminded her it was a courtesy title created by Kang Tae-sik to help her feel included after her mother remarried into the family. No shares, no vote, no right. Just kindness she had mistaken for power. Chairman Yang reportedly told her, loyalty is not owed to a title. It is owed to the people who build something. She had no answer. People like Hayun rarely do when the room stops rewarding performance. That Monday morning, Mrs. Yeon set my breakfast plate at the head of the table, across from Do-hyun's. She did not announce it. She did not apologize. She simply placed the plate where it should have been 3 years earlier. Some corrections do not need speeches. They quietly become the new shape of a house. 3 weeks later, Kang Tae-sik hosted dinner at the countryside estate. Only 6 people were invited. Not 40. Not the press. Not the family members who laughed too easily near pools. 6. I sat at Do-hyun's right hand. No empty chairs between us. The chairman was thinner than I expected, but his eyes were sharp in a way that reminded me painfully of his son. My son tells me your father's capital is the only reason this family still has a logistics division, he said. I would not phrase it as only, I replied, but I would not call it false. For the first time all evening, Do-hyun looked like he wanted to smile. The chairman almost did. I have spent 3 years being told things about my own company by people who apparently thought I could not handle the truth. Your logistics division survived the Woori buyout because my father structured a covenant your legal team never fully audited, I said. I would have told you years ago if anyone in this house had ever asked me a direct question. He went quiet. Nobody asked you a direct question in 3 years? Not one, I said. Not until a pool made it impossible to keep avoiding it. The chairman made a dry sound, almost laughter. Do-hyun said the movement was precise. Not wild. I do not do wild, I said. I had 3 years to be precise. Do-hyun finally spoke. She trained quietly. For years. Nobody knew, including me. The chairman looked from him to me. Then this family owes her more than an apology. He set his glass down. It owes her a seat. Madam Choi was not at that dinner. Neither was Sia. Neither was Hayun. Some absences feel like justice. The chairman looked at Do-hyun. You will draft the formal amendment this week. Naledi Calloway's name goes on the board seat we should have offered the day you married her. Do-hyun did not hesitate. Already drafted. I turned to him. You plan that too? This time, he let the smile come. Small, controlled, dangerous, real. I told you, he said. I do not do anything wild either. Not anymore. Later that night, in the car back from the estate, he asked me if I regretted it. The pool, the headlines, the silence breaking, the 3 years of waiting before I finally collected what they owed. I thought of Sia's pearls in the water, Hayun's champagne glass shattering against tile, Madam Choi's face when she realized the board heard everything. 40 guests going silent because they finally understood the woman they ignored was not powerless. I finally smiled. Just once. Not for a single second, I said. Some debts take 3 years to collect. I looked out the window as the city lights moved across the glass. This one was worth every day of the wait. If you have ever been underestimated, remember this. Silence is not always surrender. Sometimes silence is study. Sometimes patience is not weakness. Sometimes the woman they seat at the end of the table is the only reason the table still exists. They called me collateral because they thought I secured their power. They called me an invoice because they thought I was something paid and forgotten. They called me quiet because they did not know quiet women can read contracts, track debt, remember insults, and wait for the exact room where truth will cost the most. The mistress lost her allowance. The stepsister lost her board seat. The executive lost his future contracts. Madam Choi lost control of the story. And Kang Do-hyun, the Korean Mafia boss who had not smiled in 23 years, finally learned the difference between a wife who stayed because she was powerless and a wife who stayed because she had not yet decided to collect. For 3 years, they called me collateral. By sunrise, they understood. I was the creditor. Comment I was the creditor if that final reveal hit you. And if you are new here, subscribe to Mafia Heartbeat for more Korean Mafia romance stories where underestimated women, hidden power, betrayal, loyalty, emotional justice, dark romance, and status reversal collide. Because sometimes the woman they tried to erase is the only reason the empire is still standing.